Hello, and welcome to episode 11 of the Past Your Prime podcast. Today we'll be doing a two-part podcast, with this being part one of two.
Great job.
Explicitly clear. I'm Alex. I'm a professional volleyball player, and I have enormous calves, and I have a great voice. This is Craig. Say something, Craig.
I'm Craig. I am a physical therapist who likes patient problem pathologies.
Not sure why you had to use your fingers there.
That's 2 times where I've introduced myself without sounding.
You didn't sound like a moron, but you might have looked like.
I might have looked like a moron, so hopefully you weren't looking at the video right now, but you will need to for the session today.
Yeah, for our audio-only listeners, I think our video version is way better, so jump on YouTube and check us out there. Nonetheless,
lots of recordings today.
Yeah. We are recording right now.
Yeah,
lots of visuals will be incorporated in today's podcast.
Lots of cocoa butter and calf views of Alex.
I may have asked for oil.
He absolutely asked.
It
was weird. It was weird. Yeah.
Alrighty. So, really quickly, we'll jump into injury updates with Alex and Craig. We touched pinkies. Oh, cool.
Go ahead.
You don't have any injuries, do you?
Well, I had the neck thing that continues to circle back when I have to do a lot of sitting or if I lift heavy. And I was doing heavy shoulder press, and it irritated my neck slightly, but I did traction beforehand and after. I was monitoring key signs, so it feels fine right now.
My wrist is getting a little bit better each day. Aside from that, there's not much I can do about it. Hopefully we'll be testing it out this weekend. Probably going to hurt a lot afterwards, but I'm prepared for that.
We could always hope that it hurts more after.
I don't know why you like that so much, but
it gives me a purpose in life.
Then my tricep just randomly started hurting, or my elbow. I really don't know what's wrong with it, but I'm going to deload this week.
Osteoligamentous disease.
I was thinking triceps tendonitis, but that's just what Google told me. So,
well, osteoligamentous disease just means you're old. OLD.
Not older than you, but old nonetheless. Okay,
sure. All right, let's do it.
What's today's topic? Something about meniscuses.
We just did
horned meniscuses.
Before we started the podcast today, he really did not want to have to say the actual name of today's podcast, which is Anterior Horned Meniscal Tears or Lesions, because he didn't want to say horn. He's uncomfortable with the word horn.
Horned.
You make it sound weird. So you're right. We should have him say it. We picked a pathology, the anterior horn meniscus, that I believe doesn't have a tight connection to glute exercises or glute weakness. And it's also one that we frequently catch that gets missed, where someone comes in with anterior knee pain, so pain in the front of their knee, and they'll have, typically this is one that will have a high level of failure in conservative therapy if it's not diagnosed correctly. So
how's my anterior horn meniscus?
So he has a good anterior horn, so there's no issue there. Yeah, you definitely made it sound weird now. Now I also feel weird. I did not feel weird before the start of this podcast. I feel weird now.
You're welcome.
But yes, it's one of those injuries that I think is a good one to counterpoint, which was one of my opinions from last episode, that it's not a quick fix. The order that you do the rehab in matters. Your strategy matters. Your diagnosis and the exam matters. So it's all these different pieces that I was saying. That would be a good one for us to walk through and just see point by point by point, and then set up a whole workout plan with somebody who actually has an anterior horn meniscal lesion.
When I think of meniscus tears, I think of like soccer players, football players, kind of those activities where you're having to make quick pivots.
I like it. The quick pivots with the hands. All right.
Quick pivots or turns, something to that effect. But it sounds like that's not always the way that you injure your meniscus.
No, this one is a more common as a degenerative lesion, which means that when we walk, you are always going through cycles of flexion and extension. There's 2 points during your gait cycle, which we'll get into in a moment. This one gets hurt because your femur and your tibia compress the anterior horn of the meniscus during end range extension. Like you get more pressure on it. And so over time, it becomes a piece of tissue that gets degenerated and can be easily irritated. And then because you always walk, you're always in extension with the knee, you basically make it hurt worse. So it can be one that is really difficult to actually heal.
Can you grab your dummy and show me where the meniscus would be? This is just a skeleton.
A skeleton. So, all right. So we're looking at the right knee in this position, which, if you're going to describe it, I'm holding the top bone is called the femur. This is the patella that's connected via this wire. This is your tibia, and then this is your fibula. Your fibula. Now, when I say anterior horn, what we're looking at is the actual tibia, right? So if I flex this, and now we just look at it from this direction, this is the tibial plateau right here. This is the femoral condyles right here. Now, the meniscus is actually like a C shape right there and more of a circle shape right here on the lateral side. So you have 2 separate meniscus that we call the lateral meniscus, and then we have the medial meniscus. Now, if we look at them structurally, the medial meniscus does not move as much as the lateral meniscus. And you can see that the femur structure is actually different. See that?
Yeah, I can see that.
And so this is actually one of the reasons that we know there's significant amounts of rotation that occur throughout the gait cycle, throughout knee flexion and extension. It's because this is bigger. It has to it basically have 2 points of contact, and it forces the knee to rotate. And so when you hear the term screw home mechanism, which is a really common term, I think first kind of brought up.
That does not sound common.
Not common. It's good that Alex is here. It's a common term. Anybody who does knee work is that when you go into full extension, there's an idea that the knee goes into external rotation at the same time that locks out the knee joint. And then when you unlock it, you're unlocking that mechanism to go into flexion with some level of internal rotation.
Okay.
But it's because of the architecture of the bones. The meniscus deepens the socket and actually helps to produce some of that motion itself. Unfortunately, what you could see with the femur is that the femoral head, right, or sorry, the femoral condyles are bigger than the plateau. So let's just kind of show it again.
You're having too much fun with this.
I'm going to repeat it again. Yeah. So what you can see here, you can see that too. All right. So what you're looking at here is you can see that the tibial plateau is considerably smaller than this condyle, right? So there has to
see.
So there's portions of sliding and gliding and rolling that have to happen. The idea is that because of that mismatch in size, that you don't have just a perfect roll. You have to have also with the rolling, you have sliding and a gliding of the femur on the fixed tibia. And in between the femur and the tibia is the meniscus. And unfortunately, you do that millions of times in your life, you're going to catch the meniscus. Now, when we talk about the meniscal lesions he's talking about, like a bucket handle tear, that's in a different location. And those are the ones that they talk about their knee gets locked up and they can't move it. The anterior horn's not that. You're going to feel this one when you go into extension.
Okay, so only when you're extending your knee is when you're going to feel this one.
Typically.
So are there, it sounds like there's certain movement patterns that you want to try to avoid. Is that what just generally with all meniscus injuries or just with this anterior horn
Good question.
meniscus injury?
This one, it's going to be extension. It's going to be avoiding extension during your gait cycle. We actually shot some cool videos. So this is just Alex laying on the table, and this is me forcing his knee into extension. So when you see him just laying there flat, he's laying flat on the table, and I'm taking his lower leg and I'm shoving his femur down or holding his femur down and pulling his knee up. You see how you go into hyperextension?
Right.
Right.
Is that like a big risk factor going into hyperextension?
If you go past 30 degrees, but you run out of the...
We're in Arizona. It's 100 degrees always.
Stupid. No, so if you go too far, you quit gliding and sliding, you actually just pivot at it and it smashes on it. The people who have a ton of hyperextension, they can injure it because of it. There's a point where you get to the end of the bone and it basically pivots.
Like if you're hypermobile.
If you're hypermobile, you can really pinch
My daughter is hypermobile. We'll have to watch out for this.
That's not.
She can touch her thumb to her forearm. It is super weird.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I did a lecture here on stretching, and we only had 3 people out of the whole group who could do that. But everybody who saw that person do it, they backed away. Right? Whoa!
It's like, are you part of the X-Men? This is weird.
But everybody should have some level. You should at least get to 0 extension. But if you can get a little bit of hyperextension, like we're showing here, that's actually really nice. The biggest part that we're talking about here, though, is you should be able to get in that position. Now, if you feel that right in the front of your knee, when somebody moves it passively, or if you're standing, you lock your knees back, that's the first hint that it's the meniscus and not something like the patellar tendon or your patellar fat pad, right?
You had talked about kind of the motion and maybe getting out of balance. How does that kind of play into these type of injuries?
Yeah. Well, so this one, so when you walk, and I'm just going to put up another gait pattern up here so we can see it. So this beautiful specimen is clearly me. Now you see me walking over and over again through this. What you'll see is that you have 2 points where you're actually going to go full extension. You have it right when your heel is about to hit. That's called initial contact. Now you have 8 times. We really break gait up into 8 points of time. So when your heel first hits, that's initial contact. When your foot goes flat, that's loading response. Then you go into mid stance, terminal stance, pre-swing, initial swing, mid-swing, terminal swing. And each one of those positions during the gait cycle, each of those moments, has certain things that should happen. Now, what matters with this injury is that when your heel first hits, that's initial contact, you should have complete knee extension. And when you're right before your heel lifts off, terminal and mid stance, you should also have full extension. So you have 2 points where if you don't have what I just showed you with Alex, like if I tried to bend his knee and he didn't have it and it hurt, every single step that he takes, you're going to smash the meniscus, right? Which I think is interesting. So when we talk about missing motion, it's not really there could be a small rotation component to it, but it's really that you don't tolerate extension.
Nice. Now you have another video of you walking super awkwardly. That
gangster.
Okay, and here we have Craig awkwardly walking, straightening his leg on each step. I don't know why he's done this, but he'll tell us.
So if you watch my left leg, all right, so I'm walking across the screen going from right to left. So I'm looking at the left leg, and what you'll notice is when my heel hits the ground right there, it's completely straight, and then it stays straight the whole time. Now, what should happen during a normal loading response is the knee should flex a little bit of knee flexion at your quad muscle to absorb the force that's happening. When you keep your knee straight like this, you don't absorb force of the quad at all. And so people with this pattern, if they pinch the meniscus, which it's actually a very, very common problem that we see, whether because of quad weakness, you'll lock your knee out, or pretibial weakness in the front of your lower leg, you'll use this pattern and it predisposes you to blowing up your anterior horn of your meniscus.
And this is how you normally walk, from what you told me.
This is how I normally walk. You'll
be able to notice him in a crowd by the guy who's walking all weird.
So yeah, it's I'm very distinctive. People appreciate it. But the gait pattern in this one is gait pattern just means how you walk. So when we look at how an individual walks and the way we can break it up into those different sections, it's very diagnostic. I actually find it really interesting. The biggest part with walking is that if you look at it and you have one of these injuries, we can actually correct some of the stuff we're seeing and confirm the diagnosis from the basic exam.
And it sounds like a lot of this is just around potentially either quad strength or something else. Maybe lower back can play into it a little bit.
That's really... what I always find fascinating about this, you can have an anatomical reason that you're walking that way. You could have a muscle strength. You could have a sensory issue. You could have something with the nervous system where the muscle's not firing well. And so any one of those things could happen, but also pain. What normally happens, though, once somebody starts to hurt is they won't walk with that knee extension anymore. They'll actually almost walk on their toe. So their heel won't go down, or they really engage both the hamstring and the quad, and just looks like a very stiff pattern, knee slightly flexed, but it's basically avoiding loading the meniscus.
That'll help you get huge calves.
You'll get huge calves, 100%. So sometimes it's totally worth it.
Right. So one thing I've heard about meniscus injuries is that they don't always necessarily hurt. Is that the case with this specific type of injury?
It's actually a good question. Yes. If we imaged everybody at the age of 40 and beyond, you're going to have a huge portion of those individuals will have some level of meniscal degeneration, and it doesn't equate to pain. There's actually a really famous study, I believe, and I'm blanking on the name, really famous study where they took and had people with diagnosable meniscal tears with mechanical symptoms and pain, and also diagnosed with MRI that they had a meniscal tear. And then they broke them into two separate groups. They randomized it to one group who got a real surgery and meniscectomy where they cut out the portion that was hurting them. And then the other group, they also did a surgery, but it was a fake surgery. They cut them open, but didn't do anything. No difference in outcomes between the two groups.
Placebo effect?
No,
is that?
Well, that'd be the opposite of a placebo. Well, it could be a placebo effect from the sham. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things.
We're just going to cut your knee open and stitch you up.
I think there's a couple things. So first one is that you want to keep as much of your meniscus as you want as you can because it supports and absorbs forces. Second part with this injury, there's often a coinciding secondary injury, like a patellar tendinopathy, myogenic quad pain, interpatellar fat pad. Something else is also contributing to the symptoms. You could have a little bit of joint irritation as well. So to get to your point, if we take that imaging and we take 100 people off the street, a huge portion of those people over the age of 40 are going to show meniscal damage with no symptoms. It's not a one-to-one. So you have to have an exam that finds the pain with knee extension like we showed earlier. Typically, it has a little bit of a springy infeel, so it just doesn't feel the same side to side. If you're doing this at home, if you stand up and you lock your knees back and you don't feel like they're even, like one of them feels a little stiffer or kind of not fun, and you feel it in the front, especially the medial, so the middle and front of your knee, that would start to indicate you might be flirting with a anterior horn injury.
I don't want to flirt with any injury.
You don't want to flirt. No. Second thing though would be just a knee extension because you actually have a really, we talked about it last time, but the extensor mechanism, like your quad and your quad has a connection to the anterior horn of the meniscus. And so when you try to straighten your knee out, that can also hurt under resistance. So another way that I've caught this before, somebody was doing leg extension exercises at the gym and they kept getting a sharp pain when they would produce the motion, and then they felt like they couldn't fully extend their knee. And that person's was an anterior horn tear.
Right.
Yeah.
What other testing mechanisms are there?
The first one is the knee extension test. So you move it passively. That's the biggest one where we'll catch an issue. Number two, you have one called a Steinman test where basically I put my thumb right on the anterior horn of the meniscus, find the anterior horn in full extension, and then I'll push on it really hard. And then when I flex it, the mechanics of the meniscus move it away from my thumb, so it becomes less painful. You'll notice it with walking, so people will self-select out of walking the way that you normally walk, so they'll stay more flexed than normal.
And those are just ways that you can kind of at home look and see like, okay, maybe I've got to go see a specialist.
Yeah, if you feel on your joint line of your knee and it hurts, that's another indication that there could be a meniscal piece. It doesn't rule everything else out, but it's a component of it.
Great.
Yeah.
What's like one key point folks should remember before we kind of dive into the treatment part with part 2 here?
This is not a glute weakness issue. And so this isn't one of them where an exercise right at the start cures it. If you don't catch that you're missing extension and that it hurts, you could do so many different exercises and you won't know if it'll hurt you or not.
Awesome.
Right? This one, precision and diagnosis matters a ton, especially at the start.
Because there's so many different parts of your knee that could be producing
the pain.
Yeah.
And so that's really key to notice if your knee extension passively hurts.
Cool. Well, we'll have some extra videos up on pastureprime.com. Drop a follow, comment, like, subscribe, part 2 will be coming out next week on anterior horn meniscus injuries. See you next week.
Peace. PYP.